but I was saying, I think that it would be so lovely to do this in person, because I would love to see all of your nods or all of the shakes of your head, because I think Napoli is such an enticing, such an interesting topic. And I know that a lot of people who probably follow along with me and different things have a great knowledge of Tuscany and Florence, and maybe not so much of Napoli. And then we have the other sector of the group who is Napoli obsessed and who has quite a bit of knowledge. And so I think it's fun to have a little bit of a mixed group like this. A lot of the photography, I wanted to tell you as well before we got started, a lot of the photography here, and including the title slide, is done by my dear friend Annie Ogile down in Rome. And again, I'll be sending out her links in case you want to get in touch with her about any of these images, including this one, as I mentioned. My first trip to Napoli was when I was a 20-year-old student. I went down to the Amalfi Coast because we didn't have a school trip actually down to Napoli when I studied abroad many moons ago. And so we took the train from Florence down to Napoli, and it took like 7 hours or something. It was one of these, before you had the really fast trains. And we got there, and we had a couple of hours before our bus, I think we were taking to Sorrento. And so we said, this was my roommate and I, Erin, we said, all right, let's take a little spin around Napoli in the center. And we got back to the train station and we're like, yeah, no, that's not for us. That is definitely a little much for these 20-year-old American college students. It was big, it was crowded, it was not the cleanest place that I've ever visited. We get back to the train station and we hop on our bus, we go to Sorrento, and we're riding around all weekend on this train that you see here, probably this exact model. It's called the Circumvesuviana, and we got the biggest kick out of it because we're beginner Italian students, and everywhere there were signs that said vietato fumare, and we knew what that meant. Obviously, it's to the cigarette with the big cross through it. And so we're cracking up because everyone was smoking. Even the controllore who came to check our tickets was smoking when he came to check our tickets, with huge vietato fumare signs. So I was intrigued by this place from the very start, but I have to say, I didn't actually go back to Napoli for a number of years after that. I went back to the Amalfi Coast many times, Praiano, Positano, Capri, everywhere. But I didn't go back until about 5 years ago. I went back, I don't even want to count the first time. I went for the first time, let's say that, with my parents, actually, and Giacomo. And Giacomo was 6 at the time, and he was completely obsessed with Pompeii and Vesuvius. So I thought, this is perfect. We'll go to Napoli. We'll stay 4 days. I had just finished the Neapolitan novels, the Elena Ferrante books. So I thought, this is fabulous. This is what we'll do. We're going to go on the Immacolata weekend. So that, for those of you who know, that's December 8th. That's the kickoff of the Christmas season. And this is nothing, actually. This image right here is nothing to really show you what Naples was like that particular weekend. There were moments where literally I had Giacomo and I was like, don't leave me. Like, you cannot leave my hand. You cannot let go of me, because I'm afraid that you're going to be carried away with the crowd. It was packed to the absolute gills. We stayed for 4 days. My head was spinning. I was dizzy, literally just felt like I couldn't get my bearings, didn't know what was going on. Everything was so intense. All of the art, all of the architecture, all of the humanity in your face. I loved it. I just thought, this is a place that I want to know more about and I want to discover. And so I started actually going back pretty regularly. I go about 3 or 4 times a year. Luckily, one of the schools that I work for now does a field trip to Napoli, so I get to take students there as well. But I've been able now to, I don't even want to say get to know it, because I don't know that you can. I think that Naples is the kind of place that truly You can spend a lifetime going there, maybe even living there. If you're not from there, you're probably not going to understand everything 100%. I think I'm at about 3 or 4% at this point, understanding. But I'm always reminded of the Pico Iyer, who's a wonderful travel writer. For those of you who know him and those of you who don't, I'll send you this article. It's called Why We Travel, and it was written about 20 years ago. And he says, I want to make sure I get it right. He says, we travel because it whirls you around, turns you upside down, and stands everything you took for granted on its head. And I just think for no other place more than Napoli is this true, where you just are completely whirled around all the time. And so that's what I want to do tonight. I want us to take a whirl through Napoli. Pico Iyer also talks about the difference between a tourist and a traveler. And he says that a traveler is someone who leaves their assumptions at home. So I want us to all kind of suspend our assumptions here and let us just be whirled through this amazing space. So you have these amazing kind of contradictions. As I said, kind of in your face humanity here. You've got, this is a very typical Neapolitan scene here with the wonderful street art, and then the mother and son, you can only imagine mother and son rolling around town without their helmets on. And so at the same time that Napoli is so in your face, it's so vibrant, it's so alive, it's so completely over the top dramatic and loud. At the same time, there's something there that doesn't allow you in all the way. And this is an image that I think is really fascinating because it has this veil over it. In fact, I named the talk Napoli Unveiled. That's a really big title, and I'll tell you why I chose that title. Was because of a film, actually, that I had been told about years ago by, actually, my hairdresser is Neapolitan, and his wife told me about this film. She said, you have to see this film. It's called Napoli Unveiled. And it's by Özpetek, the Turkish director. I said, absolutely, I love him, wonderful. Watch the film, and it just blew my mind completely. I believe you can find it, at least in Italy, on Netflix. I'm not sure if you can find it in the States. I think you can, that there are subtitles. At any rate, he takes this idea of the sort of secret of memory, of everything having that sort of veil over it at the same time that it's there, that it's trying to confront you, constantly trying to engage you in this dialogue. Just at the last moment, it kind of, the wisps of it sort of flutter and fly away. So Napoli Velata, the film, became a bit of an inspiration for me, especially with the images. And so Annie and I actually worked together on a lot of these images that we thought best summed up or best could communicate this world that we're going to take through Napoli. So just very briefly, some facts, let's say, about Napoli. Napoli is the third largest city in Italy. So it's just after Milan and Rome, and then Milan. It's the second most important port next to Genova. And this is a place that has seen it all. This is 20 centuries of history right here, 20 centuries of life. There's nothing that they haven't seen. There's nothing that they haven't done. They truly embody that sort of sense of history and also of, I think, in a certain sense, this kind of pazienza at the same time of being incredibly dramatic, but that they've seen it all before, and things have a tendency to work out or not to work out, but what can you do about it? And so there is often, I feel, this kind of push-pull between this incredible beauty and then this really almost very kind of gritty reality. You guys see here, you can see my arrow, this is Vesuvius. So you see just geographically where we are, right here at the base of Vesuvius, an incredibly fertile climate and known for its fruits, wines, all this. I had to include a picture of Ischia because obviously Napoli is part of Magna Grecia, so Greater Greece. 8th century BCE, the Greeks start to come over and colonize southern Italy. So we're looking at, if you think of a map in your head, you're thinking about the toe, the heel, Puglia, Calabria, Basilicata, Campania, all of these places were part of Greater Greece. So you have places like Ischia, you have places like Paestum, where G was supposed to have his 5th grade Olympics this year. Actually, this weekend. They were supposed to start the day after tomorrow. But maybe next year we'll do it. These amazingly well-preserved Doric temples that you have in Paestum, and then Napoli. So Napoli is a little bit later than Ischia and Paestum. And Napoli is not the name, actually, of the first city. The very first city is called Partenope. And the legend is that Partenope was a mermaid. She was a siren who tried to lure Ulysses over and seduce him, and he of course he stays strong and doesn't get seduced. And so she, in her desperation, she wanted him so badly that she decided she would throw herself into the sea and kill herself, and her body disintegrates and it forms the city of Partenope. So we're talking about 8th century BCE, clearly legend, but the fortress that you see here, the Castello dell'Ovo, dates to the 1st century BCE. So the very first construction was actually up on the hill of what's called Pizzo Falcone in Naples, built high up, clearly to be able to see and have the defensive advantage there. And then Napoli. So then you have Neapolis. This is where it comes from. Partenope gets so big, so large, that they need to build a new city. So Neapolis, new city. Okay. And by this time, really by the time that the Romans come in, Neapolis is known for, mostly because of its amazing position, but also because of its culture, its Greek culture. It's known as, I should say, a place where all of these wonderfully wealthy Romans would go and vacation. So nothing has really changed. We're all still flocking down to the Neapolitan coast on our vacations any chance we get. But this was the site of not only just pure relaxing vacations, it was also a center of enormous culture. I'll tell you something. Greek was the official language in Naples until the 7th century, which is really astounding. So not Latin, but Greek. And this really underscores their cultural heritage, which really is the kind of Hellenistic heritage. This is an image from Posillipo. This is a part of the city of Naples that has this incredible archaeological site here. You see this theater. The Neapolitans were great actors from the very beginning, and anyone who was anyone came from there or staged something there, performed on stage in Naples. Even the Emperor Nero was thought to have performed actually in Naples. And so it shouldn't surprise us, of course, that 2 of Italy's most wonderful and one certainly internationally known, Sophia Loren and Totò, come from Naples as well. And so this, let's say, culture of drama and acting, in particular this art form, they're still to this day known for that. And let's be honest, those of you who have been, you know this. Napoli is drama all the time. Even the market, look at this. You've got the amazing Baroque church front and the dome, and then you've got the market that's being unloaded. There's nothing subtle that's going on in Naples. So this idea of the veiled or unveiling of, there's not a lot of subtleties. Again, it's very much kind of this aggressive beauty and this aggressive, these kind of aggressive contrasts that you see all over. Speaking of drama, this is the interior of the chapel that's dedicated to their patron saint. So he's called San Gennaro. And San Gennaro, I think he has, I don't want to misspeak here, but I want to say he has like 25 million people all around the world who are devoted to him. This is mostly because of immigration of Neapolitans over the years, but the cult of San Gennaro is massive. And San Gennaro was a martyr. He was an early Christian martyr who was killed either in the Colosseum or there's a few different legends that go along with San Gennaro. But at any rate, because he's a martyr, martyrs always die by being decapitated, right? So one of the most faithful and devout holy women who was faithful to San Gennaro was Bravissima. She caught a couple of vials of his blood as it was coming out of his neck as he was being beheaded. And lots of vicissitudes over the centuries. These vials of blood had moved around a lot. They were actually hotly contested during the Renaissance period. There was a community of nuns who owned them for a while. They were quite upset at the fact that they got taken away. But now they actually live in the cathedral. This is a chapel that is in the cathedral, Baroque chapel in the cathedral in Napoli. And this is the site of a miracle that does or doesn't take place every year, actually 3 times a year. So 3 times a year, these vials are brought out from the place where they're kept, and the Bishop of Naples shows them to the massive crowd that is assembled. And there's a hierarchy there of the crowd as well. This massive crowd that is assembled. And the blood of San Gennaro either liquefies or doesn't liquefy, depending on, again, the state of affairs in Naples. It's also the speed of the liquefaction. That essentially, what does this do? The miracle is supposedly saying that if the blood, for example, liquefies very quickly, it's going to mean a good period for Naples coming up. Now, 3 times a year, I mean, pressure's on to do it 3 times a year, getting these big, massive crowds. They actually have something like 52 different patron saints in Naples, but San Gennaro is the number one, and he is the one that really most embodies, I think, this being Neapolitan, this cult of San Gennaro, this connection to not only the saint himself, but to this miracle. It is an extremely popular ritual that takes place, as I said, several times a year. And again, those of you, I wish that I could see all of you, because I'm sure that many of you, like I do, know about 4 or 5 people from Naples that are called Gennaro, right? This is the most popular name from the entire city, and he's everywhere. San Gennaro is even here in the street art of Rome. So Rome is a place that we'll talk about the street art in just a second, but it's a place where the sacred and the profane mix quite easily, quite comfortably. You can see here this kind of modern street art of San Gennaro, and then a little tabernacle here enclosed of the Virgin Mary with this amazing Baroque sort of decorative framing up above it. But it's certainly not just the sacred. There's also profane drama all over Napoli. This is Teatro San Carlo. Teatro San Carlo. Now, Naples has been a hotly contested place. It has belonged to the Greeks, to the Romans, to the French, to the Spanish, to the Austrians, you name it.
Okay, got it.
Very, very hotly contested place. And the last set, let's say, of rulers, some Neapolitans would actually say they also belong to Italy now, as the foreign invader. But the last reigning dynasty before the unification of Italy, they were the House of Bourbon, and they build in the 1700s, in 1737, the Teatro San Carlo. And it is the longest, right, it's the oldest continuously running opera house in the world. So it's really extraordinary, and it's right down in the sort of royal quarters of Naples. Rossini was a director there. Donizetti was a director there. Giuseppe Verdi wrote, he was not a director, but he wrote operas to be performed at Teatro San Carlo. So it's a really magical, beautiful place. And something that I read, I didn't know this actually, Enrico Caruso was from Naples. He was Napoletano. So you would think that he would have performed over and over and over again in the Teatro San Carlo. Alas, after 1901, Enrico Caruso refused to perform at the Teatro San Carlo because he was booed in 1901 by a segment of the audience. So he took that out on the entire theater, decided to say that he would never perform there ever again. In the 19th century, it lost a bit of its importance. And in the late 20th century, and then now, they really are known for some of their more innovative works that they put on. Naples is a city for the senses. I keep using this term in your face. Napoli is, it's alive, it's vibrant. It is constantly, your ears, your eyes, your sense of smell, everything is taken in and taken over by the city. And music certainly not confined just to the opera house stage, but many of our most famous singers, especially this is Pino Daniele from the late 20th century, come from Naples. And Neapolitan, Napoletano, which is the dialect of Naples, it's so beautiful. It's so, it really lends itself well to music and to poetry, love songs in particular. And so Pino Daniele was a very famous, he died actually pretty young, a couple of years ago. And here he's being celebrated with some street art in Naples with a halo on. Just, you gotta love this. When I refer to Napoletano as a language versus dialect. This is something that I talk about a lot with my students in particular, but really anyone who's interested in language. We have Italian, right? We have standard Italian, and that was created in the 1860s. But prior to the 1860s, there was no such thing. Italian didn't exist. Every region, every city, in some cases, every town had its own dialect. There were major groups, but they all had their own language systems. And some of them they all had grammars, they were all languages. But some were more utilized, let's say, in poetry and in literature in particular, and Napoletano was one of them. And we have two minor languages in Italy. We have Ladino, which is the language that's spoken on the border with Slovenia, and then Sardo, Sardinian, is considered a language. So Ladino and Sardo. Napoletano is not considered a language, but there have been a couple of attempts over the last few years, several years, decades really, to try to get it, at least by UNESCO, to be considered a language. So now we talk about it as a dialect, but I think the more proper word is to talk about it as a language. And of course, language is not just written and it's not just spoken. Language is also images. And as I said, Napoli is speaking to us all the time. It's speaking to us. Its walls are literally talking to us, not just the architecture, but a lot of these images that we have. And this is Banksy. This is his only Italian piece, except Venice. And I confirmed this actually with someone who saw it over New Year's, that it still is in Venice. But there were two actually in Naples, and one of them was destroyed for whatever reason. I can't remember what exactly happened to it. This one now it's covered. You can actually see here there's no covering on it, but now it has a big kind of plexiglass cover over it. She's called La Madonna della Pistola. So the Madonna of the gun or the pistol. You can see the pistol instead of the sort of cross or halo that might normally be up there. Can you guys make that out up top, up above her head? And I think it so beautifully speaks to this devotion on the part of the Napoletani of the Virgin Mary, but also the gun violence, which is such an issue primarily because of their camorra, their organized crime group that they have down in Napoli. And so Banksy, as he does, tends to go right to the heart of the matter. And so Napoli has La Madonna della Pistola. And she's everywhere. This is another gorgeous image by Annie that you really see this kind of devotion. Look at this amazing tabernacle here of the Virgin and Child enclosed. This is a kind of ceramic piece that's enclosed in this stone sort of frame and then decorated and loved on with all of these flowers and greenery. And you see this everywhere. You see the Virgin Mary in Napoli all over town. There is almost not a surface that where she doesn't appear. This is an image from one of, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a type of housing that there is in Naples. Here you have the Virgin Mary. Look at these wonderful columns that you have on the side, and this tympanum up top. She's so great. And then another little rain protector up even above that to make sure that she doesn't get damaged there by the weather. But these are houses that you see quite often. In fact, I was doing a bit of reading about coronavirus in Napoli. And I think it was the Guardian maybe had done a reportage on it. And they went into some neighborhoods like this. I don't know if they were in the Quartieri Spagnoli or Sanità, whatever, but they were speaking with these people, mostly women, who were leaning out of their windows or leaning out of their doors right on the street level. And so my point is that you can see people still inhabit these low houses. They're actually called bassi, B-A-S-S-I, i bassi. And they come about in the 17th century. Naples has a population explosion. There's a whole host of reasons why. There were tax credits. There was a lot of work going on because the Spanish court was so was really flourishing. So artisans and different people were able to work. And so you get all these people coming in and crowding into the city center. And in order to give them housing, they started to build these bassi, and these are street level, sometimes with a window, sometimes without, door, and you open it up and you open up right into the bedroom / kitchen. Okay. Sometimes they'll have another room back behind it. It's called a stanza cieca, meaning that there are no windows in that back room. So they are very, very crowded, obviously. Here you have, this is an extraordinarily common scene in Naples, especially in some of these neighborhoods. But this I absolutely love. Here you see actually Fernanda, who has started a little pizza business, pizze fritte. You can go and get your street food from Fernanda from her house shop, her kind of casa bottega, which is one of these bassi. She happens to be, Fernanda is in the Quartieri Spagnoli. So the Quartieri Spagnoli, the Spanish quarters, you might have heard of these, or might have heard of this neighborhood in Naples. This is an image from down below, from probably via Toledo. But the Spanish quarter runs all the way via Toledo. I'm going to tell you about it in just a second. It's a main thoroughfare in town. And the reason that it's called the Spanish Quarters is because when Naples was being run by the Viceroy of Spain, and in particular Don Pedro di Toledo, just so we're all on the same page, it's the father of Eleonora. So those of you who know your Florentine history, you know this is the Duchess Eleonora di Toledo, who marries Cosimo I de' Medici. Her father, she's raised in Naples. She's raised in Naples, Eleonora di Toledo. And her father is responsible for a complete urban overhaul of the city of Naples. And so he, for example, he takes the courts, he takes the law courts, and he moves them to somewhere called Via dei Tribunali. Those of you who know, it's a parallel of the Spacca Napoli, one of the main thoroughfares in town. And he creates a garrison for his Spanish troops, and that's why they have this name of the quartieri Spagnoli. So these quartieri, the Spanish quarters that you have, you can see from this image, right? The laundry and the life, the humanity that's there. They're incredibly crowded. You have people like Fernanda, you've got the Bassi. And then just down below that, you have this street. So you have Via Toledo, and Via Toledo is kind of the posh street in town. It's a very wide thoroughfare. It's where all the big stores are. Beautiful palazzi, as you can see here on the left-hand side. Always busy, always jumping, but it has a very different feel to the Spanish Quarter, which is literally one block up, right? No matter where you are in Via Toledo, you go one block up and you're in Quartieri Spagnoli. And so here again, it's this constant whirling. It's this constant shaking you up and keeping you constantly on your toes. Via Toledo has the best metro system. I mean, the best metro station in all of Naples. Check this out. So Napoli, whereas, you know, I feel like my city, Florence, we suffer a little bit from a lack of support. I don't think it's a lack of inspiration, but I think a lack of support for contemporary artists and contemporary works of art that are commissioned by the city, for example. And so here you have this wonderful example of the city of Naples that really invested in several of their metro stations, and you can see what the result is. So here again, I mean, Naples, there's never a moment where you just kind of exhale. It is constant. There's always something. It's just a feast constantly for the senses. So this is the metro station on Via Toledo. At the end of Via Toledo is the Archaeological Museum. And I'll say, without hesitation, I haven't been to every single archaeological museum in Italy, but I've been to a lot of them. This is the best one in the entire country, maybe in the world. I don't know. I haven't been to Cairo, so I can't really comment on a lot of anything outside of Europe. But the Archaeological Museum in Naples is an absolute marvel. There are collections that belong not only to the Bourbons in particular, but also to the Farnese family. So this Roman family that, because of marriage, really gets their hands on an extraordinary amount of antiquities, And so the whole entire collection is just magnificent. Not only do you have the Farnese collection, which is mostly statuary, but not entirely. You also have almost everything that was taken during the excavations in the 18th century of Pompeii and Herculaneum in particular. And so you have entire rooms, room after room after room, of frescoes from houses, from buildings in Pompeii and in Herculaneum, more Pompeii. Rooms of treasures, of vases, of fragments of painting, you name it. It's all there. Um, it's so wonderful. It's such an amazing space. It's so massive. It is so well done, and it is so uncrowded all the time. That it really just is it's a pleasurable experience. So I encourage you on your next trip to Napoli, which I hope is soon, to go to the archaeological museum, because it really is, it's a feast in and of itself, and really dedicate some time there. Vivienne Westwood actually just started a campaign that's called Mirror the World, and she started it during the pandemic. This is the British stylist. I think she's Dame Vivienne Westwood, as a matter of fact. At any rate, she started a campaign during the this global emergency, where she is spotlighting creatives. She's talking to poets, she's talking to photographers, she's talking to other stylists, to authors, to songwriters, anyone, and she's asking them about their inspirations. And so she actually chose this series, and again, I'll put this in the email for all of you guys so you can see it. But this is the only museum in Italy that she chose to be part of her campaign. So this is the Museo Archeologico di Napoli. It's called the Man. If you want to follow them on any of the social platforms. But these were a series of images that she had selected to sort of highlight during this campaign, and I think they're just spectacular, and they so beautifully, I think, illustrate what it is about Naples in this whirling sensation. It's constant. There's never a moment, like I am telling you, where you can just, sort of rest your eyes. Or when you do rest your eyes, they fall on something like this. This is a staircase, you can see here. I have another image of it as well I wanted to show you, but the staircase itself, this is a Liberty Palazzo in Chiaia, which is a neighborhood in Naples. So an early 1900s building. It's this amazing spiral staircase. It appears in the film Napoli Unveiled, which is one of the reasons that I put it in here. But what I wanted to do on this whirl through Naples was, again, to show you the vast the variety that we have. So this isn't a city like Florence or Rome, like we were saying, or Venice, where you have this kind of concentration of one particular style and that's it. It's constantly shifting, constantly changing. You go from ancient to Baroque to neo-Baroque to Liberty to this, and it's wherever you turn, you've got it. This is Palazzo Spagnolo, again, an 18th century palazzo here that's often photographed. So you walk into the courtyard, and then this greets you. Just when you're least expecting it, by the way. Piazzas like this with church facades. This is the piazza of the Church of Gesù Nuovo. It's a Jesuit church and was built during the Baroque period, so in the 17th century, but it incorporated the facade of a 15th century palazzo. So you have this wild facade that you then walk in, and you walk into this massive church that is the Gesù Nuovo. It's massive Baroque, but to me, it's the outside. I'm not so taken by the interior of this particular church, but to me, the outside, because of this incredibly unique facade, it looks a lot like, for those of you who know Palazzo del Diamante in Ferrara, it's very, very similar to that. I just loved this detail here with these wonderful flying Baroque angels on that sliced up tympanum there. And then again, back in the piazza with this big, massive Baroque column that you have with the Virgin Mary outside. It is just an example, again, of, as we're whirling, an example of what Naples has to offer. This is a cloister that's just around the corner from this church. And I wanted to show you guys some exterior architecture and then some more interior decoration. So this is the cloister of Santa Chiara, which is a Franciscan church named for St. Clare of Assisi. And the church itself is a Gothic church. It was heavily, heavily damaged in World War II, actually almost completely rebuilt. The cloister, thank goodness, survived. And in the 18th century, the abbess of the city, of the convent, was a noblewoman. So as was fairly traditional, you would gain placement like that. You would gain sort of job like that if you came from a particular family. And this abbess was from a noble family in Naples. She was very, very cultured, and she decided that she would call in an artist to decorate their cloister. And so in the 18th century, the cloister is decorated with these ceramic pilasters that run the entire way through the garden. Fruits. It's a blue background. I don't know how well you guys can see this, but it's a light blue background, and then those colors just pop right out. So you have the greens and the blue, the bright blues and the yellows, and it's all sort of decorated with fruit and foliage on the columns. And then the benches, this is the church here in the background. The benches that you see here are all decorated with scenes from contemporary Neapolitan life. So 18th century, mostly rural Neapolitan life, but also things like the dances, the tarantella, and the various foods. There are some desserts that are even depicted in some of the scenes. There's only one that depicts religious life, and it shows a nun who's giving food to a little cat who's nearby. But they're mostly decorated with kind of rural scenes that, quite frankly, the nuns who are cloistered, they were not allowed to leave the cloister and the cloistered environment of their convent. This was where they were spending all their time, so they didn't know about really, this outside world, but it was brought into them. And I've always been so struck at how this abbess, in her commission, was able to bring the vibrancy of Napoli inside. They couldn't have it, they couldn't access it. It was just outside their doors, they couldn't access it, but she brought it inside. And when you're in this convent, in this cloister, you feel this. This is Naples inside of a Franciscan convent. And it was only for them. For 200 years, a couple of centuries, there were only the nuns were allowed inside because they were cloistered. And so everyone had heard about it, and its beauty was talked about all over the place, but no one was allowed in. And then I think it was the 1970s, it was open to the public, because earlier in the 1900s, the Clares, the poor Clares, and the Franciscans, the male branch of the Franciscans, decided to switch convents for whatever reason. So the nuns, the cloistered nuns, leave, the friars come in, and they're able to have anybody come in. Actually, I think it's the 19th century. Have anybody they want to come in. So philosophers and poets and everybody started coming in and seeing this cloister, and it got to be incredibly famous. And then, lucky for us, they opened it to the general public, like I said, I believe in the 1970s. But it's just fabulous. This is another one of these gorgeous street shots by Annie, who I think does such a beautiful job of capturing, again, that vivacity. The vibrancy of life in Naples. Look at these flowers that are just exploding, and it just reminded me so much of how this abbess had really brought that kind of vibrancy into the cloister. Flowers are everywhere, I said, even amongst the skulls. This is a cemetery. It's called the Fontanelle. And it is a massive, it's actually 3 different caves made of tuff that hold, I think they've counted 40,000, but the legend, or let's say what everyone says in Naples, is that there are 8 million bodies that are in the Fontanelle, because apparently it goes down for 15 meters underground. At any rate, we can't know that. you can only access this portion of it. But this was starting in the 16th century when churches started to become overcrowded. Everybody, of course, wants to be buried in their own parish church, but everybody can't be buried in their parish church. There's no more room. And so they started moving the bodies out of the parish churches and bringing them here to the fontanelle. When they did that, they have now stopped doing it. Now you can actually visit here too. You have to have a reservation. Again, I'll put all of this in the email. But you can visit it. I just wanted to show you, point out, do you see how there's rosaries up here? There's like a little, some sort of object up here. There's flowers. So Neapolitans, devout Neapolitans will actually go to the fontanelle and they will choose a skull or a body, you know, set of bones. Usually it's a skull, and they lavish attention on the skull because these are all unknown. Obviously, this is, you know, mass burials, and so you don't have any graves. There are no tombstones. There are no markers. And they adopt, let's say, a skull, and they lavish all of this attention on it. But then they also ask for something in return, whether it be who knows what. Some fortune and love, or maybe money, or whatever it happens to be. And if the grazia, if their prayer is answered, then they'll get a beautiful, usually you can see here, maybe like a nicer box for their skull, or they'll get, you know, some flowers and some more decoration. But if they don't get what they want, they actually will like disinherit it and go adopt another one. And so you have to be, you know, you have to be careful here of which one you're going to pick to adopt, but you can always leave that one behind. And it's funny because certain skulls apparently, you know, they look and they examine the skulls, and some of them have numbers on them, and those are very sought after because everything in Napoli. Napoli is a culture, the Neapolitan culture is incredibly connected to everything that is not happening on this particular, in this particular dimension. They are very well connected to the al di là, as we'll say, the other world, and everything has a significance. Numbers, dreams, right? The smorfia, it's called. So numbers, whenever you have a dream, there's a giant book called the Book of Dreams, and you go and you translate, you basically decipher your dream. So there's words, there's situations, and every word and every situation has a number. And so you choose the numbers based on whatever your dream was. You go through and you translate, you decipher your dream, so it turns into something that, you know, is described in words, into something that's described in numbers, and then you go and play those numbers at the lottery. So they are, and this is no joke, every single lotto tabacchi that you go in has a couple of, not just one, but a couple of the big giant, they're only for use in the tabacchi, to be able to go through and analyze your dreams so that you're playing the right numbers. Just thinking again about some of the traditions of Napoli, you will see Pulcinella everywhere. Pulcinella, this is right in the middle of town, right off of the Spacca Napoli. And Pulcinella is the mask of Naples. So he is this comedic stage character that runs around dressed in all white baggy pants and a white hat. And he has a leather mask on his face that is brown or black, like he's been burned by the sun, and he has a kind of a beak nose, and he has a pot belly, and he has his change purse on his belt, you know, because he doesn't want anybody to take it from him, and he has a stick. But he's always laughing, he's always making everybody laugh, he's very funny, he's very fun, but he's also cunning. he's a bit furbo, right? Pulcinella. So you never really know if you can trust him entirely, and he definitely doesn't trust you, and you get that because he's got his change purse that's tied right up to his right onto his belt. And so you'll see Pulcinella all over the city. Christmas ornaments for the tree, little figurines, but most importantly, as part of the presepi, so part of these nativity scenes that Naples is known for. So back at the beginning, when I talked about the trip that I took 5 years ago on the Immacolata, I thought, oh, it'll be so lovely. They have a street that has all of the nativity, the artisans that are out working, and it's perfect because it's the Immacolata, and that's the beginning of the Christmas holidays. And as I showed you with the crowd picture, just had no idea. So remembering that a traveler is someone who leaves their assumptions at home. So the street is packed during the Christmas period, but the rest of the year it's truly lovely. You can walk all up and down it because Naples is known for their nativity scenes. Some are made in China, but many are made by really extraordinarily skilled Neapolitan artisans who have been doing this craft for generations. And the nativity scenes, those of you who are familiar with Italian culture, you know the Christmas tree doesn't actually come in to the Italian culture for until the latter part of the 1900s, really, but everyone has a nativity scene. In Naples, they take it to the next level. So you have entire systems. There are pizza maker nativity figures. There are washwomen. There are, every year they come up with whoever is the most talked about person, you know, if a royal gets married or the United States elects a new president, whoever it is that has made news that year, they actually get a figure in that year's nativity scene. And so it's very fun. It's very traditional, but it's constantly, it's very dynamic. It's always changing and extraordinarily joyful. This is the street itself on a regular day. This is not any time in between the Immacolata and the Befana, the Epiphany. I'm just going to tell you right now, don't do it. Don't go. It is claustrophobia central. Thank God it's, you know, outdoors, but it is absolutely wild. It's completely packed. It's called San Gregorio Armeno. This is where they, the botteghe, all of the workshops are. I had to wait to the end to give you guys the pizza. I couldn't bring it up at the beginning because I think that would have just been cruel. But there's no way that you can talk about Naples and not talk about the pizza. Naples is known for pizza because it was street food. It was a very accessible, cheap option that was sold on, you know, but very quickly to take away, and you would fold it over, and usually 4 different, you know, you would take it and fold it in half and then in half again and eat it that way. But in the late 1800s, the queen, the new queen of Italy, called Margherita, went down to Naples, and she was on a visit, and she said, I've heard of this street food, this dough street food that you have. I would love to taste that. Someone obviously was very ingenious, and he decided that he would make a pizza especially for La Regina Margherita that would have the colors of the Italian flag. So the red of the sauce, the white mozzarella, and the green basil, and it became known as the pizza Margherita. So I told this to my nephew the other day in California, and he was just, because he was eating, and I said, what kind of pizza? He said, Margherita. I said, you know the story? And I told him the story, and he just thought that was the coolest thing he had ever heard, that this pizza was named for this queen. It's everywhere in Naples. You mostly can't make reservations at pizzeria in Naples, so I recommend, you know, getting something like a fried bunch of pasta, for example, a frittatina, to tide you over while you're waiting out in line to go into the best pizzeria The coffee in Naples is something completely out of this world. There's something, I'll actually show you this first. In Naples, coffee usually comes with sugar already added. So you have to ask them not to put sugar in. So this says, da noi il caffè viene servito zuccherato, solo su richiesta amaro. So here in our place, coffee is served only sweet, and only upon request is it served unsweetened, black. And you always get a little glass of water with that, and the coffee is boiling. They actually keep their cups in a kind of vat of boiling water so that the cups themselves are incredibly hot to the taste, almost like they almost burn your fingers. And the coffee does too. I love it because I love really, really hot coffee, but it's maybe not for everyone, or at least let it cool down just a tiny little bit. Whenever people say, why is the coffee so good in Naples? The Neapolitans will say it's because of the water, because you can use the same coffee, and you can use even the same kind of machines, but they say that it's because of the water, and I have no reason to doubt them. There's something you guys might have heard of, but for those of you who haven't, I wanted to include this because I think it shows so beautifully the spirit of the Napoletani. It's called a caffè sospeso. So it's a kind of pay it forward. You can go in and you can pay for 2 coffees if you're only having one. And so if instead you go in and you don't have €1 or 90 cents or whatever it is, you ask, as it says here, chiedi al barista, c'è un caffè sospeso per me? Is there a coffee for me? Has someone paid ahead? And this is really lovely. It was featured in the New York Times actually a couple of years ago. And so now a lot of it was on Christmas Eve, they did a really beautiful article. And now a lot of the cafes, the cafes in Naples will actually say, qui facciamo il caffè sospeso, here we do the caffè sospeso. So very much part of the culture is the food, the sfogliatelle. This is, I think, my favorite. I think this is my favorite. This is Pintauro on Via Toledo. And there's always a line going out into the street. It doesn't matter. It's completely worth it. I don't wait in line for anything anywhere else in the world, but in Naples, I'll wait for pretty much anything that they're lining up for. But these are usually breakfast. Sometimes you can eat them for dessert, but usually breakfast. It is a ricotta filling that has orange, sometimes candied bits, but orange peel and orange essence inside, and they're just wonderful. Napoli is also known for its desserts in general. I'm not going to go through all of them because we would be here all night. But the food of Naples, and also because you can find this in other places. I'm not certainly not the expert on Neapolitan food, but the tradition, the culture of it, of eating well, eating plenty, and really seeking out these sort of places that are known for their delicacies. In this case, the sfogliatelle. This is another one that's near the train station that I'll also put in the email for you. Attanesio, it's called. But it is one where I have a colleague at Syracuse that runs, literally, she will run from the train before we have to get on our bus to go wherever it is we're going on the Amalfi Coast. And she will run and get these before she has to get back on the bus, because the sfogliatelle, they are so good. And you can see here, these are, it's not just us from the outside who come in and get these. These are Neapolitan places. The beautiful markets that you can see here, these gorgeous shots of the food, the fish. This is, I think he's my new best friend. I don't know him, but I want to. Once I saw this image of Annie's. So clearly because of its position on the sea, but you can access all of this. So an extended period of time in Napoli and Naples really affords you this opportunity. And I'll tell you something, they will talk to you Here in Florence, the people tend to be a little more reserved. I remember one time I was in a dressing room in Naples, and it was recently, and fairly recently, and the woman next to me came out and she said, she like knocked or like rattled the curtain or something and went, "Scusi, excuse me." I was like, oh my gosh, what? She said, "Can you tell me if this looks okay? Does this look good? This dress," or whatever it was that she had on. And I came out, I said, "Yeah, we sort of talked about it." She said, "Because I have this event or that event, I don't remember. But we had this conversation all about the way that this dress looked on her." And I just went, yeah, no, that would never happen in Florence. Can you imagine a Florentine woman knocking on your dressing room door, this complete unknown American of all people, to be asking fashion advice from? No. But in Naples, again, it is that sense of they give so much in all ways, as we've seen throughout with these images. They give with their food, with their art, with their architecture, but also of their humanity, with their humanity. And I was telling a friend yesterday, I said, it's wild to me that I actually started my year in Naples. I spent New Year's in Naples this year, 2020. And I was looking through some of my pictures from New Year's, and it's just wall-to-wall people, and just humanity all over. And I kind of thought that would be my 2020, with lots of action and lots of that. And here we are in this moment. And so I find myself sort of thinking about those days, and also thinking about what the future might be in Naples, in this city that is so raw, that is so exuberant, also in its physicality as well. So I'll let you know, because Giacomo, my son, has already insisted the very first place that we're going, as soon as they let us out of our region, is Napoli. Not for the art. I was hoping he would say, really, I can't wait to go back to the Archeologico, but it's to eat pizza. That's why he wants to go back. So I will let you know what is happening in Napoli as soon as I can. But I really wanted to use the time tonight to be able to just introduce you to Napoli, but I've got plans to do more and be really specific. And so looking at Caravaggio in Naples, he only spent about 6 or 7 months in the city, and 8 or 9 months in the city. And he was quite prolific, but I wanted to do a conversation just on Caravaggio and his works in Napoli, and also that moment of the early 1600s as well. And so you see here his piece at the Misericordia in Napoli. I also want to do a conversation that's just on perhaps one of the most magical, mystical, mysterious places certainly in the country. It's the Cappella di San Severo, and it houses the Cristo Velato. And this is another piece. This is a veiled truth up here. This is an 18th century sculpture that is marble. It seems incredible, but it actually is marble. But this entire place contains a world, a universe, really, of magic and secret. So I want to dedicate one to that, and then one to Naples during the Renaissance as well, because it had quite a tyrannical, but incredibly cultured ruler called Ferrante in the 15th century. And then last but not least, in fact, I might do this one first, when Pompeii was excavated in the 18th century, a lot of what was excavated were really, really racy. These are actually two of the most toned down pieces that I could actually find. They were brought and kind of censored by the government at the time, and they were brought to Naples, and they were taken into what was called the secret collection, and you could only go in if you had special permission. And now it's the secret room in the Archaeological Museum. So I wanted to do a conversation about that as well. So stay tuned for all of that. I'm just looking at the time here. So it's been an hour, a little bit over. I tried to rein myself in here, but I would love to open it up at this point. I think I need to let's see, stop recording. I can do that. And then I'm going to